The rain came down in sheets, turning the world outside into a blur of neon and shadow. Each drop hammered against the windshield like tiny accusations, and the wipers struggled to keep up with their relentless rhythm. Elena could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on them, thick and suffocating, filling every inch of space in her small Honda Civic. His cologne, something woody and expensive that she'd always secretly loved, wrapped around her like a confession she wasn't ready to make. Her knuckles had gone white from gripping the steering wheel. She kept her eyes locked on the road, counting the seconds until she could drop him off and pretend this night never happened. 20 minutes. They'd been driving for 20 agonizing minutes, and neither of them had said a single word. The only sounds were the rain, the tires on wet pavement, and her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She thought about Sarah, her best friend since middle school, the girl who'd cried on her shoulder for 3 weeks straight after the breakup. Sarah had painted him as a monster, a cheater who'd destroyed her trust and left her broken. And Elena had believed every word. Why wouldn't she? That's what best friends do. They take sides. They build walls. They protect their own. But then he spoke, and everything shifted. She told you I cheated, didn't she? His voice was quiet, almost lost beneath the sound of the storm, but it cut through the silence like a knife. Elena glanced at him, just for a second, her breath catching in her throat. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on something in the distance that she couldn't see. There was pain there, raw and real and nothing like the callous indifference Sarah had described. Didn't you? The words came out sharper than she intended, defensive. She needed him to be the villain. It was easier that way. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The sound was bitter and broken, like glass shattering in slow motion. No, Elena, I didn't. He turned to look at her then, and she felt the full weight of his gaze. But I know who she was with while I was pulling double shifts at work. Her stomach dropped. The road ahead blurred, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. This entire time, every tear she'd wiped away, every angry text she'd helped Sarah compose, every time she'd crossed the street to avoid him, she had been treating him like the villain to protect a friend who was playing the victim. The questions piled up in her mind, desperate and demanding. But before she could ask any of them, they pulled up to his building. The brick facade loomed in the darkness, windows glowing like tired eyes. She unlocked the doors, the click echoing in the sudden quiet. The conversation was over. Except he didn't get out. He sat there, seatbelt still fastened, staring at his building like it was a prison he couldn't bear to enter. And she sat there too, her hand frozen on the gear shift, wondering if everything she thought she knew was a lie. Elena turned the engine off. The sudden silence was deafening. No more rain percussion, no more tire hum, just the sound of their breathing and the distant hiss of traffic on wet streets. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting unstable shadows across his face, and she realized they were completely alone in this bubble of darkness and truth. He unbuckled his seatbelt, the click impossibly loud, but instead of reaching for the door handle, he leaned toward her. The movement was subtle, just a few inches, but it closed the distance between them in a way that made her pulse spike. The air between them crackled with something dangerous, that volatile mix of anger and attraction that she'd been trying to ignore for months, maybe longer. I don't want to be alone tonight, he whispered, and his voice was different now. Vulnerable, honest. nothing like the confident guy she'd known through Sarah's stories. His eyes searched hers, looking for something she wasn't sure she could give. Not because I'm sad, not because I'm looking for a rebound. He paused, and she watched his throat work as he swallowed hard. But because you're the only person who actually sees me, who's ever really seen me. His hand moved then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. His fingers grazed hers where they rested on the gear shift, and the touch sent electricity racing up her arm. It was barely contact at all, just skin against skin, warm and real and absolutely forbidden. Stay a little longer? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. I can show you the messages, the proof, or... His thumb traced a small circle on the back of her hand, and she felt that touch everywhere. We can just forget about her entirely. This was the moment. The fork in the road where good girls make good choices, where loyal friends remember their loyalty, where the rules of girl code stand firm against temptation. Expectation said she should pull her hand away, start the engine, and drive off into the rain without looking back. Expectation said she should text Sarah the moment she got home and tell her about this inappropriate invitation. But reality? Reality was her heart hammering a resounding yes before her brain could even form the word no. Reality was the way her fingers turned beneath his, threading together like they'd been designed to fit. Reality was the truth she'd been avoiding since the moment he'd climbed into her car. That she'd always felt this pull toward him, even when he was off limits, even when she'd buried it beneath layers of friendship and loyalty. He seemed to sense her hesitation. Without another word, he pulled his hand away and opened the door. The interior light flooded the car, harsh and revealing, breaking the spell. He stepped out into the rain and walked toward the lobby door, his shoulders hunched against the downpour. Then he paused, turned back, and looked at her through the rain-streaked window. She watched him standing there, waiting, hoping, and she turned the engine off. The rain soaked through Elena's jacket in the 30 seconds it took her to cross from her car to the lobby door. He held it open, his hand steady on the glass, his eyes never leaving hers as she approached. There was a question in his gaze. "Are you sure?" And she answered it by stepping inside, into the warm fluorescent light that felt nothing like the intimate darkness of the car. Water dripped from her hair onto the tile floor, creating a small puddle at her feet. The lobby was generic and impersonal. Beige walls, a dying plant in the corner, a bulletin board covered in faded notices that nobody read. But standing there with him, shaking off the rain, it felt like the most significant place she'd ever been. Like she was crossing more than just a threshold into a building. "I'm on the 4th floor," he said, gesturing toward the elevator. His voice was careful now, like he was afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter whatever fragile agreement they'd just made. They didn't talk in the elevator. Elena watched the numbers climb. 1, 2, 3, 4, and felt her resolve waver with each floor. What was she doing? Sarah's face flashed through her mind, her tear-stained cheeks, her broken voice telling her how he'd betrayed her. But then she remembered his words in the car. I know who she was with while I was at work. The certainty in his voice, the pain. The elevator dinged and the doors slid open. His apartment was at the end of a long hallway, and Elena followed him there in silence, her wet shoes squeaking against the linoleum. He fumbled with his keys for a moment, the first sign of nervousness she'd seen from him all night, before finally getting the door open. "It's not much," he said, flipping on the lights. He was right. It wasn't much. A small one-bedroom with furniture that looked like it had come from various thrift stores and relatives' basements. But it was clean, organized, and somehow achingly lonely. There were no pictures on the walls, no personal touches that spoke of a life fully lived. Just the basics: a couch, a TV, a bookshelf with actual books. "Do you want something to drink? Coffee? Water?" He was already moving toward the kitchen, needing something to do with his hands. "Water's fine," Elena said, though her throat was so tight she wasn't sure she could swallow. He returned with 2 glasses, handed her one, and their fingers brushed again. That same electric current. He noticed it too. She saw it in the way his breath caught, the way his eyes darkened. "The messages," she said, forcing herself to remember why she was here, why she'd crossed that line. "You said you could show me." He nodded slowly, setting his glass down on the coffee table. "I can, but Elena..." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with her rain-soaked clothes. "Once you see them, you can't unsee them. Your friendship with Sarah, it'll change. Maybe end." "Show me," she said, whispering. He pulled out his phone with the resignation of someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret for too long. His fingers moved across the screen, scrolling, searching, and Elena watched the blue light play across his features, highlighting the exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. When he found what he was looking for, he hesitated for just a moment before handing her the device. "Start from the top," he said quietly, sitting down on the couch and leaving space for her beside him. "The date stamp is important." Elena sat, keeping a careful distance between them, and began to read. The first message was from 8 months ago, 2 months before Sarah had told her they'd broken up. It was from a number saved as Marcus, and the content made her stomach turn. "Missing you. When's he working late again?" She scrolled down. Sarah's response: "Thursday. He's always gone Thursdays. Come over at 9. Her hands started shaking. She kept reading, message after message, a chronicle of betrayal spelled out in blue and gray bubbles. Plans made, lies coordinated. And then, about 3 weeks before the breakup, she found the message that changed everything. "He's getting suspicious, asking questions about my phone. I think I need to end it with him before he figures it out. If I do it first, I control the narrative." Marcus's response: "Smart. Make him the bad guy. Easier that way." Sarah: "Exactly. I'll tell everyone he cheated. No one will question it. He's too proud to defend himself anyway." The phone slipped from Elena's fingers onto the couch cushion. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of watching Sarah cry, of holding her while she sobbed about betrayal and broken trust, of helping her compose angry texts and block his number. 3 weeks of treating him like he was toxic, while Sarah played the victim so convincingly that she'd never once questioned her story. "I found out about Marcus by accident," he said, his voice coming from somewhere far away. "Came home early one Thursday because I was sick. Found them in our bed. The bed I'd been paying for, in the apartment I'd been covering rent for while she was between jobs." He laughed that bitter laugh again. She didn't even try to deny it. Just told me that if I said anything to anyone, she'd make sure everyone believed I was the cheater. That she had friends who would back her up no matter what. Elena turned to look at him, and the pain in his eyes was unbearable. Why didn't you fight back? Show people these messages. Because I was tired, Elena. Tired of fighting. Tired of trying to prove myself to people who'd already made up their minds. And honestly, he reached out, tucking a strand of wet hair behind her ear, his touch impossibly gentle. The only person whose opinion I cared about was yours. And I knew you'd never believe me over her. I'm so sorry, she whispered, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. Don't apologize, he said, his hand still lingering near her face, his thumb now tracing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that made her heart ache. You were being a good friend. That's not something to be sorry for. But Elena was sorry. Sorry for every cold look she'd given him in the grocery store, every time she'd crossed the street to avoid him, every moment she'd spent believing a lie that had been carefully constructed to destroy him. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe, making her feel like she was drowning in guilt and confusion and something else she wasn't quite ready to name. I should go, she said. But even as the words left her lips, she didn't move, couldn't move, because leaving meant going back to a world where Sarah was still her best friend, where she'd have to pretend she didn't know the truth, where she'd have to keep living the lie. It meant walking away from this moment, from him, from the possibility of something real that had been hiding beneath the surface all along. You should, he agreed, but his hand moved to cup her cheek, his touch warm against her rain-chilled skin. His eyes searched hers, dark and intense and full of a longing that took her breath away. But I really hope you don't. The space between them disappeared. Elena wasn't sure who moved first. Maybe they both did, drawn together by gravity and truth and months of denied attraction that had been simmering beneath the surface of every awkward encounter, every stolen glance, every moment she'd told herself he was off limits. His lips met hers, tentative at first, asking permission with the gentle pressure of his mouth against hers, and she answered by threading her fingers through his hair and pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and everything else fell away. There was no Sarah, no betrayal, no girl code or broken rules. There was just this, his hands on her waist, sliding beneath the hem of her damp jacket to find the warmth of her skin beneath. Her back against the couch cushions as he leaned into her, the taste of rain and coffee and something that felt dangerously like coming home. She could feel his heartbeat against her chest, racing as fast as her own, could feel the tremor in his hands as they held her like she was something precious and fragile and worth protecting. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Their breath mingled in the small space between them, and Elena could feel the rapid rise and fall of his chest, could see the way his eyes had darkened with desire and something deeper, something that looked like hope. Stay, he whirred, and the single word carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. Not just for tonight. Stay and let me prove that everything you thought you knew was wrong. Stay and let me show you what this could be, what we could be. Elena thought about her phone in her purse, probably already lighting up with texts from Sarah, asking if she'd completed her mission, if she'd dropped off her cheating ex without incident, if she'd managed to avoid any awkward conversation or uncomfortable moments. She could almost see the messages. Did you drop him off? Was it weird? Thanks for doing this. You're the best friend ever. The irony of that last phrase made her stomach turn. She thought about the friendship she'd invested 12 years in, sleepovers and shared secrets, late-night phone calls and inside jokes that nobody else understood. She thought about the history they shared, the way they'd navigated middle school together, survived high school drama, celebrated college acceptances, and mourned heartbreaks. She thought about loyalty and trust and all the things that were supposed to matter, all the unwritten rules that governed female friendship like sacred law. But then she looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she'd been too blind to see before, too loyal to Sarah to allow herself to acknowledge. Honesty, integrity, a man who'd chosen dignity over revenge, who'd suffered in silence rather than drag others into his pain, who'd endured months of cold shoulders and whispered accusations without once defending himself or exposing Sarah's lies. A man who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for a very long time, like she was the only person in the world who mattered. "I'll stay," she said, and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones, warming her from the inside out. But tomorrow, I'm confronting Sarah. No more lies. No more playing along with her victim narrative. She needs to know that I know the truth. He smiled then. A real smile that transformed his entire face, erasing the exhaustion and pain and replacing it with something that looked like joy. It was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in months, maybe ever, and it made him look younger, lighter, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her and tucking her head beneath his chin. "Tomorrow," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple, then another to her forehead, soft and reverent. "But tonight, let's just forget the world exists. Tonight, let's just be us. No history, no drama, no one else's expectations or judgments." So she did. She stayed. She let him take her damp jacket and hang it up to dry. She let him bring her a soft sweatshirt that smelled like him, like laundry detergent and that woody cologne that had been driving her crazy all night. She let him make her tea and sit beside her on the couch, close enough that their thighs touched, close enough that she could feel his warmth seeping into her. They talked for hours, really talked, in a way she'd never been able to talk to Sarah, who always dominated conversations with her own drama. He told her about his dreams, his fears, the job he loved and the family he missed. She told him about her own hopes and disappointments, the things she'd never said out loud because she'd been too busy being Sarah's support system to acknowledge her own needs. And when the talking finally gave way to more kissing, to hands exploring and clothes being shed, to being carried to his bedroom where they made love slowly and tenderly, like they had all the time in the world, Elena realized something profound. In choosing him, she hadn't just chosen truth over lies. She'd chosen herself. She'd chosen her own happiness over someone else's manipulation. She'd chosen to trust her own instincts instead of blindly following the rules. And it felt like freedom. If you stayed until the end of this story, you already know what it feels like to question everything you thought was true. And if you're wondering what happened when Elena confronted Sarah the next morning, well, that's a story for subscribers only. Hit that subscribe button because trust me, the drama is just getting started. New stories every week that'll make you feel everything.